Hello, Namaskar, welcome to my pod, the CAA Show. CAA, as all of you know, is Conversations and Analysis. My name is Juggi Bhasin. To become a subscriber, all you have to do is to press that red button on your screen. Subscription is, of course, completely free. Would also really appreciate if you could like this video and share this video with your friends. All right. So just when you thought that the liberal community in India, the liberal people of India, the liberal commentators of India, the liberal media persons of India, the liberal politicians of India, this entire community, it was like a monolithic community. Nothing could ever deface it, nothing could ever split it, no cracks would ever be visible from within the community. Just when you thought all that, the split within this community has suddenly come wide open. Two important developments have happened, and all because of a film called Durandhar, where first Shobha De, she took on the people who had criticized Durandhar. She was actually, I think, referring to Arfa Khanum. She was referring to all the other so-called, within quotes, Muslim commentator media persons who had criticized the film. She says, what's wrong with the film? And if I can quote Shobha De, she said that the politicization of the film was both manipulative and utter nonsense. And she said Durandhar was an eye-opener, unique take on contemporary history, contrasting it with spy films of the past, which lacked, she said, and in her own words, ground reality. She's of course referring to Shah Rukh Khan's films earlier, where they show this completely improbable, impossible kind of a love affair between an ISI female agent and a male Indian raw agent, which can of course never ever happen. But then Shobha De put her finger on the pulse, and she reflected the mood of the country, where they not only like the film, but there's an entire sentiment which is now attached to the film, which I'm going to talk about. But this is not so much about the film, but about the fact that Shobha De was one of the leading lights of the liberal community in India, and she has broken ranks and given her own independent assessment, not only of the film Durandhar, but probably she has done a take on the entire liberal narrative in India. But that was not the only development. The other big development which is being talked about even today is this interview of Barkha Dutt, a journalist with whom I personally have a lot of respect. Her interview with another well-known journalist, Swati Chaturvedi, on a show, the Mojo Show. And Swati Chaturvedi came up with some explosive, I would say nothing short of explosive statements. And I'm going to quote some of these explosive statements which she said. She said, and quoting Swati Chaturvedi, she talked about the Zulm and the Zakhm gang, which, keeps peddling this false anti-Muslim narrative in this country. She said this gang or this ecosystem is catering to a foreign gaze. The exact words which I'm quoting, catering to a foreign gaze. And she said catering to Western press. And they are peddling, again words of Swati Chaturvedi, she's peddling pain porn. They are peddling minority porn. These are the words of Swati Chaturvedi to Barkha Dutt, where both, I think, Barkha Dutt and Swati Chaturvedi, they broadly agreed, now this is a summation which I'm getting, that there are now liberal commentators, and I think the liberal commentators, they were probably putting their fingers or pointing their fingers to Arfa Khanum, Sherwani, of course, to the likes of maybe Rana Ayub, these kind of commentators who peddle this anti-minoritism, this fact that this government is anti-minority. They keep catering, or they keep peddling this narrative in the Western press, in the Washington Times and the New York Times and all these other outlets, and in the media, other television media outlets of the Western world. Swati Chaturvedi pointed it out, and in that sense, this was again a very big kind of, you could call it an expose, statements by Swati Chaturvedi, who of course is also a very well-known journalist in her own right. So in that sense, both Shobha De, Swati Chaturvedi, Barkha Dutt, and there are others also who have broken ranks with the overall monolithic liberal community edifice, the liberal community brick wall, as it were. The cracks have now started to show, and it's not very far away when this entire wall might start even coming down. So that's what is really happening. But the question which I'm asking today in my podcast is that why is it happening now? What has changed so significantly that these changes are happening? I'm not going to discuss so much about what Swati has said to Barkha Dutt or what Shobha Day talked about Durandhar. We know those statements. A lot of discussion has already taken place about these particular statements of all these ladies. But the fact of the matter is we need to understand it. Why is it happening now? That for me is the more relevant and is a more significant question which I think needs to be answered. So let me try and answer that question from 2 points of view, both from an international point of view and also from a national point of view, because there are two or three big things, trends which are going on, which probably will explain to us that why these cracks are emerging, why the liberal community they have fallen on each other, they are now tearing each other apart, quite literally, in certain sense. Now, internationally, one could argue that ever since the new president of the US has taken over, a new administration has taken over, it's been a year, there is a government in the United States which is absolutely far right in a certain sense. There are certain, some would argue, some extreme policies which are being implemented in terms of immigration, in terms of tariffs and so many other things, but that's not the subject of my podcast. The point being that this government assumed power largely also in reaction to some of the extreme policies of wokeism, some of the extreme policies of DEI, some of the extreme policies of immigration which were evident during the earlier administration, that's a Biden administration. And they had repercussions, they had echoes, they had a fallout not only in America but at the rest of the world also. Because for the world actually sat up and actually voted this government to power, I'm talking of the US administration, because people were fed up with wokeism, they were fed up with DEI. Not a day passed when you did not hear stories of men impersonating as women, stripping and mingling with women in women's lockers and bathrooms, hundreds of different kind of sexes which are emerging. This entire industry which had sprung up of sex change operations, sex change medication, children in schools were being given choices that you want to change your sexes, all kinds of nonsensical, crazy things were being done. They were actually being institutionalized. And on top of that, at the workplace, there was this pressure of monitors, DEI monitors, which are installed in corporate after corporate, which actually their job was to keep tracking that nothing anti-minority or anti a certain kind of a skin color would ever be said, action would be taken. It was almost like George Orwell's 1984 in reverse, in a certain sense, which was being implemented. The whole world had become in a very, a kind of an ossified DEI woke workplace. And obviously for the general populations, not only in America, but in Europe and even in India, people were fed up with what was going on. So there was a certain reaction internationally. And also in Europe, the other significant thing which really happened was that the assimilation process of Europe, of the minorities in Europe with the majority population, has by and large, as people are seeing now this day after day, has actually completely failed. And it was completely apparent during the protests, the Palestinian protests, which erupted not only in the American universities, but in Europe also on mass scale, where daily people were fed up of these pro-Palestinian marches which were going on in London, which were going on in the capitals of Europe, which were had completely swept the American Ivy League colleges. So there was this reaction which occurred not only in Europe, but also certainly in America. People saw that what it could all lead to. So these were international trends which were happening at that point in time, where this entire romance, if you can call it, where this entire narrative, this entire feel-good, that I'm doing the right thing kind of narrative of wokeism, DEI, of railing against people supposedly who are anti-minority, all that was completely, people saw the real side of it, that they saw the real contradictions in all these movements. That was the international this thing. But then for us in India, we were of course affected by the international trends because now we are absolutely linked with global economies. But for us, the most significant thing which really happened, which completely turned perspective, and even the more sensible among the liberal community in India, they had no choice but not only to take notice of it, but to accept it, assimilate it, change their own narrative. And that biggest thing was the perfidy of Pakistan, of what Pakistan was doing to India, the Pahalgam terror attack. And then, of course, the resulting in Operation Sindoor, and this wave of patriotism where every person in India was, up in arms against Pakistan. Even more tougher lessons people wanted to be inflicted on Pakistan. And in that mess, if you continued with this old liberal narrative of Aman Ki Asha with Pakistan, of, that neighbors are important, you have to make up with the neighbors, give and take, and all this kind of rubbish and nonsense which was peddled by a large section of the liberal community, the most sensible among the liberals realized that the time was up for all that kind of a narrative. They could not continue with that kind of narrative. Not only they would not be accepted by the public, but public revulsion would be turned against them. And therefore, the contradictions came out, well, in the form of a film, Durandhar. I mean, of all, it took a film really to kind of, in a certain sense, bring things to a head, to, in a way, kind of, bring it all out in the open. And it was through this film that people, for the first time, they accepted the film, they embraced the film, because it was, in a sense, it kind of put its finger on the pulse of what people are feeling at that time. There was so much anger against Pakistan, and to that extent, this film helped to kind of, channel that particular anger, to show that the Indian state could win by different means. And of course, a large section of the liberal community did not accept it. And the most sensible voices, as I said, the Barkha Datts, the Swati Chaturvedis, the Shobha Days of the world, they understood that this had gone too far. They had to change narrative. They had to be more sensible in their approach or in their interpretation of events which are unfolding all around us. And then on top of that, what was the present government doing that you were so angry against it? What was the so-called anti-minoritarianism? Because people were, it was like scraping for some scraps to fling against the present government, but there was nothing. All the social empowerment schemes of the government were equally given both to the majority people, to the minority people. Nobody was discriminated. Even those, if you remember those so many years back, those instances of cow lynching and, all those controversies had kind of come to a rest. Maybe there was some odd incident here and there in the country. And then the so-called champions or the advocates of minoritism and all that, and what they were doing in their own states. Let's not get into that. That's another controversy. People saw through that. In short, what really was happening was that sensible voices in the liberal community who started taking a more centrist approach, they started taking a more balanced approach. They realized the complete perfidy of these hardcore liberal commentators and what the duplicity which lay behind what they were speaking. And that was the single big reason for the split which emerged in the liberal community, in this liberal wall, if you can call it that. And just to give you another example, a very interesting example, like as I said, the film Durandhar, which everybody knows, is a massive hit, probably one of the biggest hits that this country has ever seen. And contrast that with a film like 21. Now, 21 was about one of the legendary, one of the most feted, one of the most respected war heroes of our country, that is Second Lieutenant Arun Khetrapal. And I haven't seen the film, I'll confess to that, but I've heard a lot about the film. Some of the scenes have been shot very, very well. But there is a serious flaw in the film, that the film has been permeated by the director, by this liberal narrative of this Aman Ki Asha kind of Pakistan kind of a thing. At one level, you are showing Arun Khetrapal, who in real life knocked off so many Pakistani tanks, what a brilliant war hero he was. And then at the same time, you bring this Aman Ki Asha Pakistan, pro-Pakistan kind of narrative through the back door. And if you ask me, in that sense, you're even disrespecting the memory of somebody like Dharmendra to that extent, even though you keep saying that this was Dharmendra's last film, is one of his great films, there's some lovely poetry and all that. But a film on Arun Khetrapal should not have been about this. It should have been on the exploits of Arun Khetrapal on the battlefield, not about this stupid so-called Aman Ki Asha with Pakistan and all that. What Pakistan is, we all know, and that is why 21 as compared to Durandhar has completely bombed at the box office, because people are no longer prepared to accept this rubbish that give the benefit of the doubt to Pakistan, or accept this rubbish that you have Pakistani ISI female agents romancing with Indian raw agents. This kind of nonsensical narrative is completely gone out the window, and anybody who peddles something like that, or even shades of that, or even lighter versions of that, is going to get a kicking at the box office. People are absolutely clear about that. So that's the example which I wanted to give you. And then finally, people have also realized that all this is a manufactured narrative of being against the minorities. Look at the ferment which is happening in the Middle East. Look at the ferment which is happening in Pakistan. Look at the ferment happening in Afghanistan. Look at the ferment which is happening in Iran. Not a day goes by and your heart bleeds for all the young and the innocent people who are getting killed in Iran. Look at all what's happening overall in the Muslim world. And look at what is happening to our minorities in India. Nothing is happening. They are getting the same rights, the same privileges, the same comfort which the majority population get. And that is the reality. And now this reality is also being accepted, as I said, by the sensible voices in the liberal community. And the other big development which has happened along with that people have also woken up to another reality. They have realized that the commentators, the media persons, even the politicians who peddle this fake narrative, this liberal narrative, are people who, as in the words of Swati Chaturvedi, are not only peddling poverty or minority porn to the Western press, but they are actually making bucks out of it. They are making a profit out of it. Look at some of the lifestyles of some of these people. Just to give an example, Arfa Khanum, she was almost on a 2-year, some kind of a scholarship or whatever, from the American government, the previous government, of course. She's been enjoying herself in the States, and she comes back and he starts all that rubbish and nonsense again. The same with Rana Ayub. She was also in the US, earning good dollars from the Washington Post for articles and all that. So I don't grudge anyone for writing in any publication, but that's not the point. The point is people see that lifestyle you're leading, as Swati again, in the words of Swati Chaturvedi, that you keep talking of pro-hijab kind of a sentiment, but what exactly are you wearing in your day-to-day life, in your public life? You wear westernized clothes. So preaching one thing, doing something else in public, and that not only applies to the media person and the commentators, but even to the senior politicians. And I don't want to take names here, but we all know politicians who every 15 days or every month are out abroad, whether in America or in Europe or in Southeast Asia or any other country. Well, a trip is a trip is a trip, a foreign trip. You go, you can speak whatever you want, but you also enjoy yourself. You contrast that with what you are peddling to the people. There is nothing here. Minorities are being persecuted, blah, 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 and all that. So that narrative has also been exposed for the people. And people don't like this. People are, the big change which has come over is that people in India today are no longer willing to, you throw anything at them and they will accept it and they'll say, yeah, wonderful, we accept it. They are discerning. People are getting far more. People understand the games which not only the politicians have been playing games for a very, very long time, but the games, especially the games which media people, media persons play, some of these, in the words again of Swati Chaturvedi, these minority porn kind of people who play, people are seeing through these games. And that is why, because of that, this split wide open has occurred in the liberal community. And my own prognosis is that this split is going to deepen. It's going to deepen in the days and the months to come. The wall is going to crumble. This edifice is going to crumble. And hopefully, I'm not even for a moment suggesting that there should be some kind of a swing to an extreme right or something. I am not in favor of that. But I do believe sensible, objective, centrist positions need to be taken. If you have to take a position, the old days of objective news coverage and not opinion kind of news, they have to come back. And the only way to do that is to have a certain centrism in our lives. That maybe is the hope. But right now, it's exposure time. It's time to expose, it's time to reveal, it's time to throw and show these people who are building these false narratives for months and months and years, if not years. It's time to expose them. And so on this note, I come to the end of this podcast. I hope you really enjoyed it. You like my show, do subscribe to it. And on this note, it's goodbye and cheers from my end.